Hello, world. Welcome back to D&D Beyond. I'm Joe Starr. I'm the head content hag here at Phantom Tabletop and D&D Beyond. I am joined by an amazing panel. Saige Ryan back with us, and and DeAngelo Murillo, who inspired this entire episode. So thank you for coming on the show, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We're talking about two things that are near and dear to our heart today. It's a very monster themed episode. We're talking hags, we're talking oozes. So if you are watching with us on Twitch live right now, thank you so much for joining us. And if you got hag and ooze related questions, which hey, you might, get them in the chat, and we will make sure we check those out and answer them. If you are watching on YouTube in the future, and you're like, where's the part where they talk about the ooze? It's two separate videos, so be on the lookout for an ooze video coming your way very soon. Again, as usual, you guys know this, Candlekeep Mysteries for sale right now on the D&D Beyond Marketplace, featuring some hags, and I think featuring some oozes, and of course, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which is just a wonderful place for both of these monsters to start popping up and horrifying people. For pre-order right now, also on the D&D Beyond Marketplace, and that will come with all the usual pre-order perks and goodies, blah, 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 blah. Infomercial over. Let's talk about hags. DeAngelo, it's the point of the article. You pitched this to me, and you're like, I think hags are very underutilized and misunderstood. So I want us to walk through a couple of our favorite types of hags in D&D, and kind of go over sort of some of their powers, abilities, what makes them special, and then we can really kind of dig into like what you can do with them and how you can really like incorporate them in memorable ways into your adventures and all that good stuff. So let's start off with the Dusk Hag. So Dusk Hags are your traditional, like gnarled crones, with visions and all that good stuff. And they've got two really cool, unique traits, which I'm going to have you guys jump on because they're pretty cool. So one is Nightmare Touch. This is if the target is unconscious, it takes an extra 10 or 3d6 of psychic damage and is cursed until the hag dies or the curse is removed. A cursed creature's hit point maximum decreases by 5. And then you have Dream Eater. When an unconscious creature the hag can see within 30 feet of her regains consciousness, the hag can force the creature to make a DC 15 wisdom saving throw. Unless the save succeeds, the creature takes 2d10 psychic damage, and the hag regains hit points equal to the amount of damage taken. That's horrifying.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it is.
Great, but
the beautiful thing about hags is that you can look at any one of them, the Night Hag, the Sea Hag, the Dusk Hag, Annis Hag, any of them, and they all have a unique like toolkit to use, and which usually looks like terrifying. And if you look at their character art and their monster art, it doesn't look like anything you'd ever want to encounter. You're like, that's like nightmare fuel, to see it and everything. So it's pretty awesome to like see these creatures and be like, all right, but how can we make them neutral or good? Because like, as the great philosopher Kanye West once said, the prettiest people can do the ugliest things. So if that's true, then that means the opposite can be true as well. So it's like, I always love the idea of taking like these most terrifying creatures and then twisting them into NPCs that are like, whoa, hold on. Because if you come into a town and witch hunters are like, we'll give you 50 gold if you can bring us a hag's head, you're like, oh, that's easy. Hags are super evil, so that's no problem. And if you meet the hag and are just like, oh, they're actually really nice, maybe we shouldn't do this, then it's like moral conundrum, and then it's like becomes a really good situation.
And sort of here's sort of where we come into this like this crux of the idea, right, where it's like, how do we make hags more than look if you're running a campaign and all a hag needs to be is a wall between your players and a treasure, that's dope, but go for it and more power. But I think there's these little choices, like a lot of the stuff that you talk about in the article, DeAngelo, that can give you a little more depth, give you a little more of those moral kind of conundrums. Saige, one that I love that he pitched was sort of the idea of the crone sort of in the street and like getting by using those, that nightmare touch and those dream eater sort of abilities and sort of twisting them for good, reading palms and stuff like that. I think that's kind of cool.
Right. I think that there's a lot of, I mean, obviously everyone agrees that the more complex villains are villains that don't believe they're the villain in that scenario, that are doing what they consider to be the right thing to do, or they consider to be their best, which I think a hag has, like, it's hard to argue that a beholder just like really thinks he's doing his best. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to be like, oh man, that mimic really just believes he's doing the right thing. But to take a hag and to have that kind of humanoid form that can compel people in a way of looking like some kind of figure that they are familiar with, I think can be really compelling. I can't help it, but when I'm looking at the Dream Eater ability, I just want a Nightmare on Elm Street D&D.
Right?
I just want a Freddy Krueger-esque figure that is taking from you in your sleep, and something that you could, like, I mean, this is the opposite of the fun way, but like tormenting your players of like every time they go down for a long rest, what is happening, trying to figure out what that is, and the reveal of that big bad being a hag. Oh,
well, and here we go. I think that idea really ties into what DeAngelo is doing in this article, which is like a simple moral conundrum. You know, a simple moral choice. Do we let this hag go? Do we do what we would normally do and kill her or chase her out of town or whatever? And then suddenly that moral conundrum has ripples, right? Where it's like, now they're having bad dreams. Now that nightmare touch is doing things because there's consequences to that choice, you know? So even if things didn't end up immediately right there with like, and now the hag, we fought it and it's done or whatever. Right. Like there's choices rippling through your players' decisions, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got all of the different takes on it recently from like WandaVision too. You have all of these witches that we're putting in popular media that could be represented as hags really interestingly, of people that are just like, I've just been given this power and this is my power to protect. And I don't, think I'm doing the wrong thing. So I think there's a lot of fun opportunities to represent characters that are more familiar to people if they're not super familiar with what a hag is necessarily in the fantasy world. I mean, like who wasn't traumatized by the hag creature in The Shining? Right? Like who wasn't absolutely traumatized by that as a child? Like,
or Snow White for like the queen trying to get to the old woman with
absolutely 100%. Like that's my sleep paralysis demon.
And DeAngelo, you were starting to say something. I want to make sure you get those final thoughts on the Dusk Hag in.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that the Dusk Hag can actually like see into the future and give you like prophecies and everything like that for your players is like a super cool thing that can be utilized absolutely for any dungeon master to either add like, oh cool, you actually help this Dusk Hag, therefore she's going to give you a little help in the future that was going to make it a little your journey a little bit easier, and instead of just like straight gold or a straight magic item or something. And it's like really fun to think of these new concepts or ideas and how to.
That's such an easy story hook too for future adventures. That small little bit of prophecy, gives your players some really fun seeds to think about. So, even if you're not ready to pull a trigger on a prophecy or something like that, if it is, I think on the table, it's like, if you see a crow run, you're going to die. Yeah. I think that's on the table, but just teasing them with birds every now and then.
Yeah. It's also oh, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Oh no! If the next NPC they got to deal with, or a few NPCs down the road, is a crow bird folk, just mess with them for a little while.
Go ahead and make a question. Yeah.
Say what were you gonna say?
So good.
I think there's also another cool opportunity for like a moral dilemma there. If there is someone in town who has that kind of perspective of like offering them insight into the future, and letting them kind of choose how they treat this woman in like the old school, like very movie trope thing of like, okay, if you're cool and you treat this hag with respect, then in theory, you will receive something good. And if you make the choice to be like, I'm burning down the town and getting out of here, like most of my players do, the great consequences of being like, cool, I get to bring that hag back then. And we're going in later of that choice you made. What, 4 sessions down the line? Like, hey, remember? Because she does.
Yeah, no,
you absolutely did this as you pull out the dice and throw it on the table.
Yeah.
The next one, let's head to the woods for a little bit, and we got to talk green hags. These creepy old ladies of the forest, and so let's jump into these their sort of unique traits first, because first of all, they're horrifying, and any Cabin in the Woods movie would be better off having a green hag in them. So invisible passage. The hag magically turns invisible until she attacks or casts a spell, or until her concentration ends. While invisible, she leaves no physical evidence of her passage, and she can only be tracked by magic. So, at the gate, you have this, your party enters the woods. You have this invisible stalker, this predator situation basically happening, which is just super fun to play with your players' paranoia. Then the next trait is this obsession with tragedy. Green hags revel in the failings and tragedies of other creatures. They derive joy from bringing people low and seeing hope turn into despair, not just for individuals, but also entire nations. And then just the huge note for me is mimicry. The hag can mimic animal sounds and humanoid voices. A creature that hears the sounds can tell if they are imitations with a successful wisdom or insight check. So yeah, that's horrifying and awful to me. So yeah, the quintessential, old lady in the woods. This is definitely DeAngelo. Your Snow White crone.
Yeah,
Hansel and Gretel. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is like a very traditional one. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No. Please.
Okay, yeah. So this is a very like traditional hag. That's what we think of when we like someone who like eats people, tricks you, brings shows you everything you ever want, and then like suddenly before you know it, it's just you're devoured or gone too far. But what I always love to think about is like, what if there's like a green hag out there that's just like so dumb that she thinks the best way to like hurt the community is by protecting the animals or something like that, or like some sort of like roundabout way that she's actually doing good without realizing it and trying to do bad or whatever, just to make more fun villains, and then like using mimicry to try to like distract people, or make her to the point where they actually want to help out the community and be like, you know what, I'm so sick of tragedy that I want something else. Like there's got to be more to this life than like just listening to people's like be sad or sorrowful or whatever. Or you can with it and then simply be like, I want to hear the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your entire life, and that's like a beautiful spotlight moment for someone's RP like your background. So these are really good ways that are like non-combat sort of things, and like granted, if they just want to slay the hag, that's cool, but they're gonna have a hard time with an AC of 17 and tons of hit points and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a lot more fun for players to get to explore their background by talking with the hag. Yeah.
Well, you've given them a great motive, right? Which is what if they are just actually trying to protect the forest?
Yeah.
Quests usually start in town, right? The mayor, the little halfling Mayor Butterscotch, the halfling mayor is just like, oh, we keep going into the woods and this thing keeps picking off our people. And then once you're in the woods, it's like, oh, because they're logging, or they're getting too close to something of magical importance in the woods and just protecting it. Exactly.
Yeah, the witch style, like the movie. Something that I see really interesting about this particular witch, in particular Green Hag, is, I mean, this is like a homebrew slight break of the game, but like I would love to see a story where there's something that was like, maybe this was previously someone who was a practiced druid, for instance, who their forest fell and they lost connection with their forest spirit, and they lost a lot of their abilities along with it, and they became this kind of strange thing that's attached to this dead forest. And then it's kind of this point where it's, are you slaying this thing to get through this forest and move on and protect maybe the city nearby, or are you finding a way to repair the nature in this area and help it reconnect with the spirits of the forest or the spirits of nature that it was previously connected to? I think that like reading through these abilities, looking at the like illusory appearance and all of these like the animal calls and things like that, feels like somebody to me that could be like in pain because they're no longer able to like connect to the spirits, they're no longer able to wild shape into these animals that they previously could. That I think would be a really compelling use of that hag.
Like that we're just really going to Sad Town with these hags.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I love it.
No, I love a good tragic villain.
Right? Especially with the
humanize the
hags.
hags.
You could just yes, exactly. How you could just like transform yourself into someone who looks physically appealing, and then they like have great encounters with them the whole time, and at the end of the day they realize it's a hag, and now they have to decide like, oh, we've had great experiences and we understand that they're more than just a monster. Maybe we should let them go. And like, those moral conundrums are so good.
Yeah. And even in that, like, and that's why I love that now you've set this hag up, this character up so much more than a monster. And now they've got they're a catalyst of some consequence in your game. Because we're cool with this hag, we let this hag go, but at some point later, hag's gonna hag. Does that hag then commit an atrocity later on?
Yeah.
And you guys have to be like, oh, we could have lopped her head off and prevented that.
I'm changing my
DeAngelo-
Twitter bio to Hag's gonna hag.
I'm gonna hag, baby.
Right? There you go.
DeAngelo, something you mentioned that I loved about Green Hags was this idea of like, they're so much older than most folks. Like most player characters would probably be like kids to them. So, what if their actions are just born directly out of just the idea of like, oh well, they just know better. They just know better than you.
Yeah,
they're much smarter. They just know this is for your own good. Trust me, I know what's good for you. I've been around a lot longer than you. Just the overbearing grandparent angle, taken to the extreme of a hag, I think is super fun.
Yeah, it's really good to do like intimidation and everything, and to trick, because typically players, they turn like the shadows casted by like a fire on like a cable or whatever into like giant monsters, and like, oh my god, there's got to be something terrifying there because we're hearing weird things, and like we're seeing things move in the woods, but they usually blow it up to be this huge giant monster, so it's easy to just try to like shoo them away, and then and of course consequences if they keep charging forward, they'll find like a giant owl bear or something that's super decked out, and then like that's why she tried to protect us, or what have you. And just like putting some more like stuff in there, because especially if they live for so long and have so much of civilizations rise and fall, they definitely are probably to the point where they're just like, you're no more than a doe to me or what have you, so let me just guide you along this path.
Yeah, exactly. And Saige, there was another great idea in the article that I think you'd have fun with, is like the idea of a green hag as a matchmaker. They know better than you, and this is for your own good. They know who your soulmate is, and ignore that advice at your own peril. Like this green hag who's obsessed with like.
I love that.
Yeah,
they're just hiding in the woods playing Fantasy Bachelor. I'm so
exactly.
Yeah,
obsession
and just like, no, this is for your own good.
Romance. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
Just no. This guy's your soulmate. I'm going to kidnap him from his life and force you to come rescue him. So that I love me an obsessive hag.
I love that. I think anything that's like a hag that is just like alone in the woods meddling in people's lives, like with the reason that they know better, with the reason, whatever is their motivation. But the idea of them just like meddling like a grandparent.
Yeah.
So
they love
funny.
Gossip, and they love to get in the middle of stuff. Yeah,
oh my God. They're just collecting secrets. Ooh, a little secret keeper in the woods.
Exactly.
Who just feeds on
love
just
it.
knowing things. I was so into it.
Hey, and also chat, if you got hag questions, we got hag answers maybe. Hit us up in the chat, and mods, I'm looking for them questions on Slack. I appreciate y'all, and say thank you to your mods, by the way, and they're working hard for us. They're giving away those bundles and keeping the town safe, and I appreciate y'all. Let's head up to the mountains. The Anise Hag, the Anise Hag. These are your big, like, huge, like diesel truck sized, hunchback, hump shouldered, very like physically imposing hags. These are the ones that can tear a person apart. They're also, I think, the biggest. I won't even call it the biggest challenge, DeAngelo, to your idea of like, what if they're just trying to do good?
Because that was pretty tough.
Yeah,
they actually make it better in a way, like, because they're so horrible. So I want to read through this parade of atrocities, and then the idea of someone who this is their traits is like trying to do good is wonderful to me. So a crushing hug, obviously just a full on, just gross bludgeoning bear hug. Child corrupter. When these hags feel especially cruel, they can disguise themselves as kindly-looking elderly women approaching children in remote places and giving them tokens to that they can use to confide in her. Over time, Granny convinces the child that it's okay to have bad thoughts and do bad things, breaking things, going outside without permission, maybe pushing someone down the stairs or setting a house on fire. They're horrible. Then this idea of tribe mother, much in the way that they befriend children in order to corrupt them. Hags have a tendency for adopting groups of ogres, trolls, and other dark creatures, ruling them through brute strength, verbal abuse, and superstition. And then, of course, tormenting the weak. Obviously, these kinds of hags are very, very strong. But they love hunting and torturing and savagery. So these are the kinds of hags that, leave tokens of cruelty at the edge of forests and the areas that they claim to provoke fear and paranoia. So all of these sort of work together in a lot of ways. I think the idea of tribe mother and child corrupter, especially. Yeah. DeAngelo, I think the premise that you're going to sort of try to make one of these misunderstood is that sort of like cornerstone of family.
Yeah, because when you look at the Anis hag, and I didn't even know about this hag at all before, because it was going to be a night hag originally, and then I saw it and I was like, what is this? And like I checked it out. I was like, oh my God. And then like, because they literally love hunting children. It says that in their actual bio. So this is like super grimdark. And usually for like games, there's like lines and veils. It's like, what is the thing you don't absolutely do not want to see in adventures? Like, harm against children. And this one's like, oh, this harms children. Like
that's real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, oh my God. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, we could twist this. Because especially the line that like, that it wants to... It just loves seeing society and communities get torn down, and they love grief and misery and woe. So I thought it would be like fantastic if there was like, because the real like even like what I always think of is the Hunchback of Notre Dame. That line, it's like, here's a riddle for you, like who is the monster and who is the man? Is it the half-formed Quasimodo, or is it Frollo, who is like a super tyrant and all that kind of stuff and everything? So I always think about that. So I would love a storyline where an Anis hag is like, oh, I'm going to corrupt this like town and get all these children to do evil things. But then like a war rages in nearby and it slaughters tons of people. And they're like, oh, I don't have to do anything. Like humans are already doing it amongst themselves. Like, let's try to help out a little bit and like, like take these children and like, instead of twisting them to do evil things, like try to give them some semblance of a good life while they're here. Cause it's like, there's enough dead bodies around clearly. And, because like, and that makes it like, because it's so easy to like, it looks evil, it is evil, you just have to kill it, sort of thing. But it's so much more fun to have more of a role play sort of thing and be like, whoa, hold on, wait a second. And then, I don't know, it's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you sort of, to continue this sort of idea of like the best bad guys think that they are in the right, if places are like reporting missing kids and stuff like that, and it is this hag, but if you sort of meld all of those abilities into sort of like one sort of general idea, it's like, yeah, this hag decided that the humans were cutting it as parents for whatever reason, and now she's raising these little kids like little lost boys and girls amongst her trolls and her ogres and all of her like these weird creatures she's gathered to herself. I mean,
that's great.
Technically not doing anything wrong,
at least especially not in her eyes. I would love now, and like catch me playing this soon, no doubt, because this is stuck in my brain forever, but like to write a PC that was raised by two hags, like two Anis hags specifically, and to have that idea of it being the like, oh, these are just like my aunties that I go back and visit, and like they do happen to be child corrupting hags, and like you're playing a hero. You're playing somebody who's, grown up to be like a cleric or something good. Yeah. It's just like, I got to go home and visit like my mom's, and going back to visit and they are just like straight up proper Anis hags.
Yeah. And they never ever mention that they're hags. They only mention the good stuff. So like, wow, these are really good parents that you have. And then they see that they're hags and like, oh my God.
And it's like, well, they are technically, yes, they are. And yes, they do corrupt and eat children, but like they, they raised children? Me.
Yes, but.
Right.
Everyone deserves like family, a do-over, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Got a question from chat. I don't know if we'll have a good answer for this or not, but we may, or at least you two may. You're much smarter than I am. Baston Cider asks, oh my gosh, I just spent hours last night trying to research hags. So this is great timing. But I keep trying to find any kinds of rules regarding what it means to renounce a hag's bargain or break it, and if there are rules regarding what the backlash is. I finally decided it's probably governed by some kind of like Fey realm balance. I don't necessarily know what the mechanics would be around that. My ruling would be, I think, whatever makes it the most interesting for your players. I think you're sort of on the right track already of trying to figure out like what that backlash needs to mean, because you're already on the right track of being like, there needs to be backlash.
Yeah.
So, and there absolutely should be. So I mean, really, I think whatever fits your table, whatever pushes character story forward, stuff like that. I think that's definitely a place where you can lean into your own flavor and maybe worry less about published mechanics.
Yeah, I haven't seen a published mechanic for that either. And I think it's kind of like a similar thing that you get into with like warlock pacts, where it's like, if you decide to really screw over your patron, like that's a lot of the time going to come down to DM and player flavor of like, what is the consequence of that? What were the terms of that deal? Quite simply. There's obviously going to be losing whatever benefit it is, but maybe something's coming back from the Fae, then whatever granted that hag their powers is coming for you, whatever the like next kind of up in the line of power and deity.
Yeah, no, I think that could be super fun.
Exactly.
DeAngelo, anything? Anything on backlash and consequence with like, especially with sort of your idea of like sort of trying to spin some of these into different angles and stuff like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, especially like the old fables, like, oh, you got to accomplish this by like the third sunrise of whatever, otherwise something terrible happens. And it's like, oh no, because they're all of the Fae, so they all have that like magical connection to it. So I'm sure they could, and some are more magically inclined, like the Night Hag and the Dusk Hag and everything like that. So, there's a lot of ways to do it, but mostly homebrew is probably the best way. And yeah, I think you could go anywhere with it, where like maybe they turn into a hag for like breaking a promise, and then suddenly they have to live entire life of the same thing they had to, so
that's fun. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities to pull from like the grim fairy tales in that scenario of like, because I mean that's where we get these tales from. So like any of the consequences that you go through of any of the original grim fairy tales would be a very, very fun pull for your story.
And speaking of some of those fairy tales, we gotta go underwater before we move on from our hags. We gotta talk sea hags. So unique traits, horrific appearance, any humanoid. This is so mean. Poor sea hags.
I know it is. It really is.
Any humanoid that starts its turn within 30 feet of the hag and can see the hag's true form must make a saving throw. On a failed save, they are frightened for 1 minute. Poor hags. But then, so then they have a death glare. The hag targets one frightened creature she can see within 30 feet of her. If the target can see the hag, it must succeed on a wisdom saving throw against this magic or just drop to 0 hit points. That's wild. And then ugly inside and out. Sea hags are by far the ugliest of all hags. Scales, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we're just really leaning hard on the sea hags. Like, oh, we get it. So they can hide their true self, like the other hags under a veil of illusion, but they are cursed to forever appear ugly. And their illusionary form is even just haggard
at best. Yes.
Which is also
going to be my Twitter bio.
Yeah. Haggard at best.
Hag's gonna haggard at best.
Haggard at best. So DeAngelo, I know you've got a lot of love for Ursula. So take us on the sea hag adventure.
Yeah. So like when one thing is like I try my best to be like a super hardcore feminist and move the narrative that like, to be a more progressive thing. So when you come to the hags, they're either like older, like they look older, or they, look ugly and everything like that. and they're also very feminine. And there's this weird thing in society that, like, you know, if a woman is older or like doesn't look a certain like stereotypically beautiful, then we should treat them lesser than or whatever. And I hate that concept so much. So when it comes to hags, it's all everywhere, you know, which is like story wise, it's there when you like totally get it and everything. But it's so much fun to say, like, let's get the Little Mermaid and make it the Little Hag, and like, you know, change Ariel from a beautiful mermaid who can sing really well and everyone loves her and is a princess, and make her into a sea hag who's like, you know, super ugly, can literally kill people with her how like ugly she is and everything like that. But she still desires romance, and she wants to, you know, fall in love one day, and like wants to go amongst the people and all that kind of stuff. And then like that's such a great like memorable moment that you know, players would be like, oh my god, we absolutely should help this person, you know. And like it's because it's so easy to just make them a monster and be like, oh, let's kill him. And then but if it's actually like a situation where I'll make it easier for you guys to get through this passage or get you what you need really easily, if you just get me like one date with this person or whatever, or like, you know, one time that I can just feel normal, then it's like, oh, we'll absolutely do that. So it's like, it's pretty good, you know. So yeah,
I can only go to like the strangest part of my brain, and it's just being like you having to take this like a hag with you to a party. Like they just really want to be, they really just want friends. And like you got invited to this really cool ball, and like you have to take the hag as your guest, and you have to treat them well. And like,
and then do their hair and makeup and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm talking
kind of a
makeover montage.
Yeah, it's kind of a she's all that situation. I'm very, very into that. And also, you know, brief PSA, DeAngelo used the feared P word, progressive, and yet look at what a little bit of progressive thinking did for him. It opened up a lot of cool new storytelling doors for him. Look at that. Nothing but benefits and bonuses. Moving on. Just want to throw that in there.
Love that.
Got a couple questions. Just how I think could feel. Darren, I'm so sorry that I've messed up your name. Darren asks, how would you put a hag in a straight up just heroic position? So we've sort of talked about them as being tragically misunderstood and sort of supporting, but how would you like make a hag like straight up like the protagonist of a tale, or at least, you know, the Han Solo of your story?
Yeah, I think it would be taking any sort of like story that you love and adore. Disney is easy because they're already borderline fantasy or are fantasy, you know, and then replace the key characters of like, oh, I'm the very beautiful godmother, and like replace it with a hag and be like, you know, I've got your back 100%, you know, you are beautiful, you're amazing. And like, especially if it's a sea hag where they know how it is to be vilified just by their looks or whatever. And you have someone who like is that support system, like, or even what Saige said about the two hag mothers, like raising children and all that kind of stuff to, that's an easy way to be like, you know, we've seen so much horror and death in this world. We're going to protect this town because no one else will if we don't, you know, and we're going to use all of our tribal mother stuff to make sure that these hill giants and everyone else is going to protect these people. And suddenly the monsters are really the heroes, and the humans with their torches and pitchforks are the villains. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great take on it, is like having a hag that protects a village, and that this is the person that has kept their village safe from intruders that have been trying to march on their land for some time or something of the sort. And maybe you're even marching in, your band of heroes might even be marching in with like something that they consider to be a rebellion to take down, you know, this town that is run by a hag. It sounds like it's keeping all of these people hostage potentially. And you get in there and realize that like all of these people are protected by, and this hag has taken kind of that role of ownership and keeping them safe for all this time, and letting them be the hero of that town, and letting that, again, moral dilemma come back up of like, oh no, this hag isn't oppressing these people. We are the ones. Maybe we're the bad guys.
Are we the baddies? Yeah.
You guys are really sort of digging into that sort of fun idea of like squirrel versus rat, where it's like, you know, all of this stuff comes from the Fae at some point, right? Or is connected to it at some point. But we tend to just like really love like really pretty cool stuff that comes from the Fae. And then, you know, squirrel versus rat, right? Squirrels are fluffy and cute, and rats are rats. Oh, rats. But like, hags are from the Fae too. Give them a little bit of love.
I love the spooky stuff from the Fae. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's good.
My main character is a Fae warlock, like a Fae patron warlock. Like I love the Fae and every part of
Yeah.
it. And I love that it can be something that isn't just like this beautiful, magical, filled with flowers, colorful place. Like the Fae is terrifying in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And layered. Yeah.